Yeah, why don't you all come up on stage? First of all, let me just say, Drew, where's Drew? There he is. So far an amazing day, but I do think one slight flaw, the idea of having everybody who's probably operating on 12-hour time zone changes on at the end of the day, probably not the best move. But I do have a solution. I thought you all needed a bit of a pick-me-up, so here, we've got some chocolate for you, maybe a Cliff Bar. I think what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the global perspectives that we're all facing and try to weave this together into a sort of a chief digital officer chat. Before we start though, why don't we do some quick introductions? And Arlene, why don't we start with you? Maybe not only tell the audience where you're from, but sort of what your lens is, what area of the business you work in, and sort of what keeps you up at night.
Okay, I'm Arlene from Omnicom Media Group China. I'm responsible for two things. The first thing is I look after a bunch of clients that are more digitally skewed in OMD and PhD. And I also wear another hat, which is to look after 5 SBUs. These specialist units include Analect, Acuant, which is our trading desk, Resolution for search, social at OMG, as well as Airwave, which is mobile marketing. So both hats.
So you're not very busy.
Yeah, no. I can come here, so I'm not busy.
There you go. Robbie, how about yourself?
Hi, Robbie Hills. I'm based in Singapore. I look after essentially the double-click stack across China, Southeast Asia, and India, and about to take on a new gig where it's sort of focusing a lot more programmatic stuff in other markets as well in Asia.
Chris.
I'm Chris. I've been in Asia for 20 years, lived in China for most of the time. Probably a bit of an experiment because
Mike's not working.
Thanks, Brian, for staying here. He wanted to go to the gym, but I told him our session will be great, so he said he's going to stay. I lived in China for 20 years, and I'm a bit of an experiment, probably in Ogilvy, because I'm for the last 10 years spent my time in digital, and now just recently started to look after the kind of traditional side of our business, the advertising business in Asia, to make sure we digitize that as fast as we can. So spent a lot of time in India recently, where I think a lot of interesting things are happening.
Yeah. Well,
and I just had 2 cans of Red Bull.
2 cans of Red Bull, so you don't need the crunch.
I don't need the chocolate.
Okay. Well, I think my mic is fine. I think why don't you keep it? So, Robbie, you're giving a little talk tomorrow about how Asia is not a country. Can I steal a little bit of your thunder, or get you to steal a little bit of your thunder, and tease us a little bit today with what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that when I was talking to Drew about it, I mean, we're constantly having conversations with people from Europe or the Americas around wanting to come and do business in Asia, and for a lot of people when they think Asia, they're either thinking maybe Tokyo, maybe Singapore or Hong Kong, and they don't really understand the nuances that exist across what is a very, very large region. And having to do business in mainland China is different to doing business in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Chris mentioned India. What one size does not fit all. And I think one of the things that we have to constantly remind ourselves about when we're doing business in Asia Pacific is that you have to very much tailor your message, tailor your offering, and understand the nuances that exist in all of those individual markets.
So, I mean, let me challenge you a bit on that. So is that true from the context of doing business, or is that true in talking to consumer, the actual message targeting and delivering a relevant message to consumer, or both?
It's both. I mean,
right.
The region is littered with people who come in from other regions and trying to do a one size fits all model. It just, you can't, when you speak, obviously speaking to an Indian consumer is completely different speaking to a consumer in China, and different from Beijing to Shanghai is arguably. I mean, these guys probably speak to that more than I can, but you have to. And doing business is, whether it's regulatory issues, whether it's financial issues, nothing is the same. There's multiple currencies, multiple languages.
Yeah, just on the message side though, it's interesting because I'm in Europe, and the same thing is true. Europe is not one country, unlike the U.S. And you do see this a lot where Americans come over, and I'm Canadian, but I lived in the States for about 13 years. I went to Europe thinking, oh, this is great. We'll consolidate everything, and we'll have this sort of, one hub in Europe, maybe France or Germany, and we'll do work everywhere. And you find it's not true. But then this morning, during the Unilever presentation, we saw the Dove Sketches video, 200 million views. I noticed that 30 million views in the US, 30 million views in China. And I think the only thing they changed was a different VO. So help me reconcile these two conflicting sort of perspectives.
I think that's a Chris answer. That's his agency did the work.
That.
Yeah, so tell me, is the world flat, or is it just a bunch of microcosms?
I think what's happening, that definitely more and more clients of ours are looking at digital with a global lens, and I think that maybe wasn't the case in the past as much, because you kind of give more authority to the markets just so they actually do something. Mm-hmm. And I actually had several clients tell me that, because as soon as you want to do something globally, it takes a long time and it takes more coordination and all this kind of stuff. But so I think a company like Unilever, for example, would encourage their local markets to just spend and do something, just get into the digital game. But I think now that you see there's a lot of stuff happening, you look how you can consolidate it, how you can optimize it, and there's definitely more and more interest in doing things globally. And I think Dove is a great example for that. And you see that a strong idea definitely can have universal appeal. So I think you'll see that more and more happening, and also purely from a financial side, I think that there is a strong benefit in having global deals with the key platforms rather than having every country do their own thing. And we have some clients, for example, they had 180 different Facebook pages globally for the same brand, and within 6 months we consolidated that into one. And so I think you'll see that more and more happening.
So again, so perhaps, I see this time and again that the above the line work is more often being created centrally and then distributed. Digital seems to be sort of falling. It's not quite there yet. Is that true in China? Is that true in Asia, Arlene?
Digital is what, sorry?
So you see broadcast campaigns that are very much produced and centrally distributed around the world, but digital not quite being done that way. Digital still very much localized.
Yeah.
The exceptions being, I think, video, which you see video, which is really broadcast over the web.
So I think there are two levels. The first level is the messaging. I think broad strokes like confidence, beauty, filial piety, that kind of thing, that still works globally around the globe, and we can share a lot of the content. But on the second level, in terms of platforms, China is very different. For example, Google is hardly in China.
Yep.
It's in Hong Kong, and Facebook is almost non-existent in China unless you have a VPN access.
YouTube, no YouTube.
No YouTube. So we can't just plug and play what works in Facebook will work in China. So it's too sweeping a statement. And many a times when we see a lot of clients trying to fit an American strategy into China, we have to do a lot of education to the client of what really works. And one of the other thing about China, China is theoretically not even one country. You have 200 over cities from tier 1 to tier 5, each of them with their own nuances, stages of development, economic powers, so on and so forth. So, even within China, we have the way we treat higher tier more developed cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou versus the lower city is also quite different. So, yeah, there are many considerations.
Yeah, cool. So Chris, I'm curious. I mean, a German in Asia. So tell me, what's that like?
What's so wrong about that?
Well, I think it's
There's
interesting.
a few more.
Are there?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. What advantages and disadvantages have you faced as a result of
From being German?
from being
Only
European,
advantages.
from being
Actually, the Chinese, they're kind of the Germans of Asia. So we fit very well. No problem at all. I mean, I came there very early,
Yeah.
so I guess I got used to it fairly quickly. And then one thing I can recommend to everybody is to get a Chinese wife. That will help you adopt even faster. But seriously, I don't think you have any major disadvantages for being a foreigner, and I actually think increasingly that's maybe even a benefit now for what I do, because for many years we were on the receiving end of things. Global stuff was developed in the States or in Europe or whatever, but now we have more and more big brands in Asia that go global. So I spend nearly all of my time right now not with our big global clients, but with our big Asian clients that are looking at getting into Europe, getting into the States and stuff like that. So having that global perspective and obviously the experience in dealing with companies in Asia helps a lot.
Yeah, cool. Actually, just to stick with you for a second, there was one of your blog posts I read recently. You talked a lot about how there's so much innovation in the .com space in China that you think there will be a time where, unlike currently, where Facebook and Google and YouTube, which aren't in China but are clearly global platforms, have sort of taken that advantage. But you think there'll be a Chinese brand that will do the same, that will start in China, born in China, and then become a globally adopted platform.
Yeah.
Do you still believe, that was a few years ago, do you still believe that?
Still believe it, and you see it happening. You see it happening. Tencent, for example, WeChat is becoming a global phenomena. I think you will see Taobao and a lot of stuff that they are doing to find application beyond China. You maybe will not see someone to challenge Facebook, kind of become the next Facebook, but there is a lot of stuff that these big Chinese internet companies are doing to set themselves up to be successful outside of China eventually. Obviously, that's not their key priority right now, because you still have 400 million people that are yet to be connected in China. So you probably focus on that first. But Baidu is investing outside of China. Taobao is doing it. Tencent is doing it, and there's also a lot of vertical players that are actually very, very big in China. Just looked at a parenting website in China last week. It was actually the biggest parenting website globally by users, they're also doing things now in Japan and other places. So you'll see that definitely happening.
So do you see that same degree of innovation happening within digital marketing, sort of innovation being driven out of Asia that you think will then become pervasive, or is it more in the .com space? What do you think, Arlene?
Well, I think the great thing about China is the whole domestic scale. There's just so many people online, 621 million on the last reading. That you can see from nothing to something just leapfrog just like that. So if you don't see something today, you'll certainly see it within the next couple of weeks. I mean, take for example programmatic buying. It started last year. It was very, very small, and this year it just exploded. Because once clients latch on it, what's good about Chinese clients is that they are very innovative. They are very gung-ho to try new stuff. There's so much confidence in the economy that there's no luggage. There's no they basically embrace risk, and then they just go with it. That's the momentum in the market.
I mean, to give you an idea of the innovation, I mean, just on the programmatic side, last count, because we launched our ad exchange in China last year, and we counted about 40 plus DSPs, local DSPs, in the Chinese market. Now, I think some of them have already gone by the wayside, but the quickness to the market in terms of getting these technologies up and running is tremendous. And it's, when you think about, it's not, and there could be like 300 people in some of these companies, 500 people. We talk about scale. There's, some of these, companies like MediaV, IPNU, they actually have 300 to 500 people sitting in offices managing this stuff.
Right. Engineers in China, server and data farms in China, just milking the growth of the market. Which is just phenomenal. The other thing is that the Chinese love to work. They work all the time. So we have seen phenomenal things happen. Like we can be talking to a DSP at 3 a.m. on a Sunday night to launch a campaign on Monday. So
you never call me on a Sunday night, by the way.
Yeah, I don't call you.
No.
But it happens. So that's the momentum of the market. People are working and launching new stuff all the time. There's so much confidence in the economy.
Amazing. Robbie, you mentioned India. So how equally large, how similar, different is India compared to what we just heard in China?
Well, it's sort of similar and different. I mean, it's similar into what Eileen mentioned about being not really one country, but being however many odd states there are with multiple languages. It's a of that 1 billion people, about 10% are online, so it's about 100 million people. So it's a big number, but they're contained within the big cities because India is largely a rural population. Again, though, it's full of engineering talent. So we're seeing some really interesting plays come out now. There's a company called Vizuri, which is like a Criteo sort of retargeting business that's come out of Bangalore. That's doing some amazing things. I mean, I think, and when you compare them, I think China's ahead of India in terms of technology advancement, in terms of digital, a long way ahead. But it's catching up pretty quickly.
Cool.
And I spent a lot of time in India this year, and I really feel they kind of, it clicked in India. It's a very traditional market for us, but I think in the last kind of 18 months, you really see a lot of clients getting into digital. There's a lot of activity, lots of energy behind digital, and the numbers start to make sense as well. And I'm pretty sure you'll see a lot of great innovation coming out of India. And the good thing you have about India is that people speak the same language, and it's already an outsourcing hub for a lot of global clients. So I'm sure you'll see a lot of innovation in the digital space coming from India. There's already a lot, but I think you'll see that happening.
We have a few minutes left, but just one question. What worries you all about the next year or two in digital in those markets? What are the issues that keep you up at night?
Talent. There's a huge talent crunch in China. First of all, advertising is so new in this market. And then second of all, digital is so new in that market. And then thirdly, programmatic is even newer. So if you're going through the layers, first of all, it's hard to get media planners. And then it's hard to get digital media planners. Then it's harder to get specialist digital people, whether it's search or social or programmatic. Most of the time we have to train, get them fresh from school and train from scratch, on-the-job training. But by and large, it's really hard to find talent.
What about you guys? Any others?
I mean, talent's, across it's not just China, it's across every country in Asia. I mean, Southeast Asia, we face the same problems. I think the other thing is, from a digital marketing perspective, media perspective, is getting clients to, there's in some countries, again, there's a reticence to, open up the purse strings a little bit to the levels that it should be, considering the markets. So I think we've got a lot of challenges around education of marketers and clients in many countries in Asia, where you say, $5,000 a month on programmatic is not going to cut it. When you're talking about 1 billion people in China, we've got to at some point move past just testing and getting really scaling these businesses in these markets. And I think that's something I think is, all of us, spend a lot of time educating marketers that, you need to actually invest heavily into this arena.
Chris?
For me, nothing specific for Asia, but for our business, I just hope that we'll get much better, much faster in really being able to use data effectively. We're talking about it for a very long time, and I feel that the key to drive a lot of the adoption of digital and accelerate that is to really be able to use data in a much smarter and different way than we're doing it now. And obviously it's for us to get the people to do that as well, but I think if we're able to do that and really make sure that we use those insights in the way we design campaigns and the way we measure, in the way we look at our business, you'll probably see a much more dramatic shift than it is happening yet.
Yeah, I think just on that point, we talked a lot about data already today, but the companies like the Exelates, the Blue Kais, these guys aren't really in Asia yet. And so when you start talking about things like third-party data, it's there's not a lot of it in Asia in many countries. Australia is probably an exception. There's a bit in Australia, but in these other markets, there needs to be a much better job of some of these companies to actually start harvesting and harnessing the third-party data that's available for the DSPs, for example, to use.
Do we have any questions from the audience? I think we have 10 seconds, maybe one question. How many people want to go outside and see some sunlight? How about that? Oh, there's a question.
I got a question about this sort of notion that multinational headquarters should be in America, for example. I hear a lot of talk about potentially multinational companies going to set up their global headquarters in places like Shanghai or other places around the world. And a corollary is, and I don't know whether this is going to be part of the discussion tomorrow, but is there such a thing as Asia? Is there such a thing as Europe? Surely, client marketeers, as you've got internationalists on the stage, I'm just interested to hear about whether or not actually a new kind of configuration of clusters of markets which actually have more in common across global, that you might have Indonesia's got more in common with Mexico than it has necessarily with India. So there's two questions. Global headquarters, are we going to see in the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years more people moving their global headquarters to Asia and other parts of the world?
Let me actually jump in here for a second. Mondelez is one of our clients, and their global office is in the US, but it's virtually empty. They talk about having a very small space. I suspect what you'll really see is no real headquarters. They all live on planes, and they all fly around everywhere. So I think they're talking about, they've had conversations about distributed headquarters or just virtual. So I suspect that would be the bigger model, where it just sort of, it's in a 747 somewhere.
I think some of our clients, I find it a sensible way to just, instead of looking at it by regions, to look at it in terms of opportunity. And I think some of the big global companies, they have now, emerging markets clusters or growth market clusters and established markets. And we have one client where the emerging markets or growth markets, 150 of them are run out of Singapore globally. And the established markets have their own setup, but that I think is a quite sensible way to look at it, because I think a lot of those growth markets have similar issues and approaches, so there's a lot of learnings between them.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, everybody.